On the 7th of March 1863, 18-year-old Princess Alexandra of Denmark arrived in England to marry Prince Albert Edward, Queen Victoria's son and heir. As the princess made her way to London, she may have felt the weight of expectation on her shoulders. Over the next 6 decades, Alexandra would have to contend with her husband's regular infidelities, personal illness, the death of 2 of her children, and the destruction of the First World War. Despite all of this, Alexandra was a popular figure in Britain. But did she play any role in modernizing the British monarchy? This is the story of Alexandra of Denmark. The woman known to history as Alexandra of Denmark was born Princess Alexandra Caroline Maria Charlotte Louisa Julia of Denmark on the 1st of December 1844 at the Yellow Palace in Copenhagen. Her father was Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, Sonderburg-Glücksburg. He was distantly related to the Danish ruling family, the House of Oldenburg. While his prospects were initially modest, in 1852 he was chosen as heir presumptive to King Frederick VII of Denmark, who did not have any children, despite marrying 3 times. Alexandra's father would consequently rule as King Christian IX of Denmark from 1863 until his death in 1906. In 1842, Christian married his cousin, Princess Louisa of Hesse-Kassel, the daughter of Princess Louisa Charlotte of Denmark and Prince William of Hesse-Kassel, a minor German prince who spent much of his life in Denmark and served as military governor of Copenhagen. Of Christian and Louisa's 6 children, 2 sons would become kings: Frederick VIII of Denmark and George I, King of the Hellenes, the name of the rulers of Greece after a monarchy was established there in the aftermath of the War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire in the 1820s. From amongst Christian and Louisa's daughters, one would become Empress of Russia, while Alexandra would become the Queen of the United Kingdom and the Empress of India. As such, while this is a somewhat forgotten royal family of one of Europe's second-tier powers in the 19th century, the members of it went on to rule as regents and consorts over large parts of the world. Despite her royal and aristocratic lineage, the princess, known to her family simply as Alex, grew up in relative austerity at the Yellow Palace. Denmark was not a wealthy kingdom with a vast colonial empire like Britain or France, and Prince Christian and his family were largely reliant on his modest income as a Danish army officer. The family's fortunes were further impacted on by the debate over the future of the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. These duchies occupied the southern part of the Jutland Peninsula along the border with the German states. They were ruled by the King of Denmark, but remained separate political entities with their own succession laws. At the time of Alex's birth, King Christian VIII of Denmark was in his late 50s, and his son, Crown Prince Frederick, had failed to produce an heir and was believed to be infertile. While the Danish crown could pass to a female heir, this was not the case in the duchies. Southern Schleswig and Holstein were predominantly German-speaking areas that welcomed the prospect of breaking away from the Danish Union and joining a new united German state. In 1848, as a wave of revolutions swept across Europe, Christian VIII died, and was succeeded by his son as King Frederick VII, who soon married the ballet dancer Louise Rasmussen as his third wife. Meanwhile, pro-German uprisings in Schleswig and Holstein encouraged a German National Assembly in Frankfurt to go to war with Denmark in March 1848. While the Danes ultimately emerged victorious after a 3-year-long conflict, their possession of the duchies remained vulnerable. An international conference held in London in 1852 named Alex's father, Prince Christian, as heir to the Danish kingdom, as well as the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein, with his mother-in-law and wife renouncing their claims to Denmark in his favour, thus resolving the problem of mixed succession practices in Denmark and Schleswig and Holstein. While Alex's family was now one step away from the Danish throne, the Glucksbergs were scandalized by King Frederick's marriage to a commoner and stayed away from court at Bernstorff Palace, a few miles outside Copenhagen, which was given to the family in 1854. As a teenager, Princess Alex enjoyed walking and riding around the grounds of Bernstorff and the nearby village of Gentofte. In England, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert of the United Kingdom, had it proposed to him and his parents around 1860 that Alex might be a potential royal marriage partner. Known to the family as Bertie, the prince struggled to meet his parents' high expectations for a future king of England. Bertie did not share his father's intellectual interests, and while he was a sociable young man, his charming demeanour counted against him as his flirtations with actresses threatened to scandalise the British royal family. As Albert began considering Bertie's potential marriage prospects in the late 1850s, his initial preference was for his son to marry a German princess, just as his eldest daughter, Vicky, had married Prince Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia in 1858. From Berlin, Vicky was instructed by her father to report on the suitability of a shortlist of German princesses, all of whom were rejected. This led Victoria and Albert to consider Princess Alexandra of Denmark, although they knew that this would be unpopular among their German cousins. Despite their initial misgivings, both Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, along with the British government, were conscious that establishing a royal link between Britain and Denmark through the match could potentially prevent the Germans from making a second attempt to seize Schleswig and Holstein. Vicky arranged a meeting between Bertie and Alex in September 1861, while the Prussian army was carrying out manoeuvres in the Rhineland. While Alex came away from the meeting under the impression that she had captured the prince's heart, Bertie spoke little about her when he reported back to his parents. Victoria and Albert's plans for the union of the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Denmark would face many obstacles. In November, Albert learned that shortly before meeting Alex in Germany, Bertie had engaged in a relationship with the actress Nellie Clifton while receiving military training in Ireland. Despite suffering from a lengthy illness at the time that would soon claim his life, Albert was so incensed when he learned of his son's affair that he went to Cambridge to confront him about it. When the Prince Consort died on the 14th of December 1861, Victoria held her son's recent behaviour partly responsible for her husband's demise at only 42 years of age. She was nevertheless determined to fulfil her late husband's wishes, and in September 1862, Bertie and Alex were engaged. While the announcement was welcomed in Denmark and Britain, Victoria remained sensitive to German opinion and denied a request from the Danish court for Bertie to visit Denmark before the wedding. Victoria instead invited Alex to England, where the Danish princess made a favourable impression on the widowed queen. The date of the wedding was fixed for the 10th of March 1863, though there was widespread disappointment that the ceremony was to be held at St. George's Chapel in Windsor rather than a more public celebration at St. Paul's Cathedral or Westminster Abbey in London. After leaving Copenhagen on the 26th of February, Princess Alexandra was greeted by her groom at Gravesend, and the couple were cheered on their way to London, where the Lord Mayor struggled to make his way through the thick crowds to welcome the princess. After the wedding on the 10th, the couple spent a week on honeymoon at Osborne House, the Italianate royal retreat on the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. Osborne House had been designed by Prince Albert. The couple would spend their married life between Marlborough House, the Prince of Wales' London residence near St James's Palace, and Sandringham, the Norfolk estate purchased by the late Prince Albert as a gift to his eldest son. Early in her marriage, Alexandra witnessed a series of significant events in Europe, many of which affected her family. In autumn 1863, her 17-year-old brother Prince William was unexpectedly offered the Greek throne and became King George I of Greece. In November, King Frederick VII of Denmark died, and Alexandra's father succeeded as King Christian IX. Christian's claim on Schleswig-Holstein was challenged by Frederick, Duke of Augustenburg, a member of a rival branch of the House of Oldenburg. The Duke's claim was supported by the German states led by Prussia, whose new minister-president, Otto von Bismarck, used it as a pretext to launch the Second Schleswig War on the 1st of February 1864. The British royal family was divided between the Queen, who favoured neutrality, Vicky, the Crown Princess of Prussia, who supported the German claim, and Bertie and Alex, who vocally defended Alexandra's father's claim to the duchies. Alexandra was pregnant while the crisis was unfolding and prematurely gave birth to the first of her 6 children, Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward, nicknamed Eddie, on the 8th of January 1864. During this period, Alexandra was often at odds with Queen Victoria, who blamed her for allowing Bertie to go out to parties at night. In October 1864, not long after the Second Schleswig War ended, in Prussia and Austria securing control over the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein, Victoria reluctantly allowed Bertie and Alex to visit Copenhagen, where they were enthusiastically welcomed by the people. Although the Prince of Wales got on well with his Danish in-laws, he found life in quiet Denmark dull. On their return journey, the couple had a frosty meeting with their Prussian relations, Frederick and Vicky. Alexandra was deeply irritated by Frederick's decision to wear a military decoration he had won during the Second Schleswig War. In June 1865, Alexandra gave birth to her second son, the future King George V. Like all of Alexandra's children, the boy was born prematurely, though the pregnancy was relatively straightforward. The same could not be said for Alexandra's next pregnancy, which prevented her from attending the wedding of her younger sister Dagmar to Alexander of Russia, the future Tsar Alexander III, in November 1866. Dagmar had previously been engaged to Alexander's elder brother Nicholas, who had died of tuberculosis in April 1865. Upon her marriage, she converted to the Orthodox faith and took the name Maria Fyodorovna. Back in England, the Princess of Wales was 8 months pregnant when she developed rheumatic fever on the 15th of February. She gave birth to a daughter on the 20th, but remained in considerable pain. Her husband seemed unconcerned and continued to stay out late, causing his bedridden wife further anxiety. When rumours spread beyond the walls of Marlborough House that the princess was dying, Queen Victoria belatedly recognised the seriousness of the situation and sent word to Denmark, whence King Christian and Queen Louisa hurried to their daughter's bedside. By the 10th of May, the princess was well enough for her daughter to be christened Louise Victoria Alexandra Dagmar. Alexandra was permanently affected by the illness that had occurred following her pregnancy, which left her increasingly deaf and with a damaged leg for the rest of her life. While Bertie showed outward concern for his wife, her precarious health did not prevent him from making regular visits to France, where his encounters with Parisian ladies were the subject of much gossip. Meanwhile, Alexandra's pregnancies continued, with 2 more daughters, Victoria and Maud, born in July 1868 and November 1869, respectively. In April 1871, while the family was at Sandringham for Easter, Alexandra gave birth to a son. Despite her previous experiences of difficult pregnancies, no preparations were made, and the baby prince only lived long enough to be christened Alexander John. He died the following morning. In November 1868, the Prince and Princess of Wales left England for a 6-month trip abroad. After calling upon Emperor Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie in France, the royal couple went to Denmark for Christmas, where Bertie was quickly bored by the festivities and absconded to Stockholm with his brother-in-law, Crown Prince Frederick. The couple journeyed on to Berlin, where Alexandra tried to overcome her anti-Prussian sentiments while meeting Bismarck and King Wilhelm I. She had a better time in Vienna, where the royal couple were given a sumptuous welcome by Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elisabeth of what had just become the dual empire of Austria-Hungary. After leaving the territories of the Austrian Habsburgs, the royal party sailed on to Egypt in early February. The princess was invited to visit the harem of Khedive Ismail in Alexandria, where she was treated to a 20-course dinner by the Khedive's mother. As the party steamed up the Nile, Bertie enjoyed shooting at the wildlife on the riverbanks, while Alex took in the ancient sites and liberally distributed coins to boys selling trinkets they claimed to be ancient artifacts. After going past Aswan, the party turned around at Wadi Halfa near the present-day Egypt-Sudan border, where she took a liking to an orphaned Abyssinian boy named Selim and took him on as her attendant. After returning to Cairo, the Khedive took them to the almost finished Suez Canal, where they met its French developer Ferdinand de Lesseps. After leaving Egypt, the entourage went to Constantinople, where Alexandra became the first woman to dine with the Ottoman Sultan. After stopping at the battlefields of the Crimean War, Bertie and Alex visited Greece, where the latter was briefly reunited with her brother, King George. After returning to England in May, Alexandra was delighted to be reunited with her children at Osborne House, where they had been subject to Queen Victoria's draconian rules. The family headed for Sandringham, where Alexandra's new Abyssinian servant enjoyed jumping out from the bushes to frighten the local folk who had never seen an African in the flesh. Selim's jokes went too far when he was found to have tampered with the king's rifle during his birthday hunt, and he was dismissed from royal service. Meanwhile, Bertie ordered the house at Sandringham to be expanded in time for his birthday in November 1870. 1871 was to be a sad year for Alexandra, as Prussia's victory in the Franco-Prussian War led to the formation of the German Empire under the King of Prussia, now Kaiser Wilhelm I. After the loss of Alexandra's short-lived son, Alexander John, Prince Albert Edward caught typhoid in late November, and by December his condition was serious enough for Queen Victoria to travel up from Windsor. While Alexandra attended to her husband, he became delirious and alternated between abusing her and demanding her presence. After being on the brink of death in mid-December 1871, Bertie gradually rallied, though he was not fully recovered until February. The service for the Prince's recovery at St. Paul's on the 27th of February 1872 was the greatest public demonstration of support for the royal family since the couple's wedding. Once again, Alexandra was the centre of attention, credited by the people for saving the future king's life through her love and grace. Despite the renewed closeness of the princely couple, Bertie would resume his extramarital affairs, and when he visited India in 1875 on a hunting and shooting tour with a group of male companions, Alexandra had to stay in England. By the mid-1870s, Alexandra was in her early 30s and the mother of 5 children who represented the new generation of British royalty. While Alexandra doted on her eldest son, Eddie, who stood second in line to the British throne after her husband, she belatedly recognised that he and his brother George were poorly educated. Rather than sending them to public school, the princes followed a long-established royal tradition and joined the Royal Navy as cadets in 1876. In September 1879, the teenage princes embarked on a 3-year cruise around the world aboard HMS Bacchante. After their return, George continued his naval career, while several tutors were employed to help Eddie prepare for university at Cambridge. In March 1881, Tsar Alexander II of Russia was assassinated by revolutionary terrorists, making Alex's brother-in-law Tsar Alexander III. Against the Queen's advice, Bertie and Alex travelled to St. Petersburg for the funeral. Security considerations forced Bertie and Alex to spend most of their time at the Anichkov Palace. After Bertie returned to England, Alex remained in St. Petersburg to support her sister, who struggled to recover from the shock of suddenly becoming Tsarina of Russia under such violent circumstances. Alexandra's family's links to the Russian Romanovs ensured that she remained well-disposed to the Russian Empire, in contrast to her hatred for all things German after the Second Schleswig War. When Kaiser Wilhelm I of the unified German Empire died on the 9th of March 1888, Alexandra refused to cancel the celebrations for her silver wedding anniversary the following day. Wilhelm was succeeded by his 56-year-old son, Friedrich III, making the Prince of Wales's sister Vicky the new empress. Alexandra was hopeful that the liberal-minded Friedrich would consider returning Schleswig-Holstein to Denmark, but the new emperor was already terminally ill with throat cancer and died in June, leaving his son Wilhelm II as the new Kaiser. When Alexandra attended Friedrich's funeral, she was appalled by the way Wilhelm insulted his mother. When the Kaiser visited Sandringham early in his reign, he got into a shouting match with the Prince of Wales and cut his visit short, prompting Alexandra to remark, "Thank God he's gone." Alexandra was otherwise a generous host at Sandringham, being equally friendly with Liberal Prime Minister William Gladstone as she was with his Conservative arch-rival Benjamin Disraeli. Despite her impeded mobility owing to her leg injury, she remained an expert horsewoman and paid special attention to the inexperienced riders among those whom her husband invited to join in his hunts. The princess loved to dance, and Sandringham held 4 balls each year, including one in December to celebrate her birthday. She particularly enjoyed the servants' ball, during which she and her husband invited their household staff and local country folk to participate in a night of dancing. While Queen Victoria rarely visited Sandringham, the monarch called on her daughter-in-law to help out with social occasions at Buckingham Palace and Windsor. Although their relationship had initially been frosty, they became closer during Victoria's later years, and in 1890 the Queen paid tribute to Alexandra by remarking, "However terrible the load which I lay upon her slender shoulders, she not only never complains, but endeavours to prove that she has enjoyed, to what to another would be a tiresome duty." The Princess of Wales' reputation for kindness and generosity encouraged the Queen to become more benevolent in her old age. Given her own incapacity, Alexandra showed particular concern for the sick and incapacitated, regularly visiting the London Hospital in the East End of London. In 1904, she would become president of the institution, now known as the Royal London Hospital, where her statue, from 1908, stands in the grounds. One of Alexandra's greatest contributions to British medicine was to persuade British doctors to introduce the Finsen lamp, which had been developed by a Danish physician and which was used to treat lupus with concentrated ultraviolet light. The princess was also concerned about the welfare of soldiers at war, and she organised the dispatch of supplies and comforts to British servicemen in Egypt and Sudan during the Mahdist War. When Queen Victoria recognised that while Alexandra could command the love and respect of the people, the same could not be said for Bertie, who was deeply in debt from his gambling habit and often departed for the continent to hunt and shoot. The prospects of the next generation seemed even dimmer, as Prince Eddie's time at Cambridge was accompanied by rumours that he was gay, which was problematic for the royal family given the social conventions of the time. In June 1885, the prince left Cambridge and enlisted in a cavalry regiment, though his shy and unassuming personality made him a poor army officer. The British Army's Commander-in-Chief, Prince George, Duke of Cambridge, proposed sending him to Gibraltar, where he would have no choice but to take his military duties seriously, but Alexandra insisted on remaining close to her favourite son. This was no longer possible when Prince Albert Victor was named among the prominent men who visited a brothel for men in the Cleveland Street scandal of October 1889. Although the prince had only made a single visit out of curiosity, it was rumoured that he was a frequent client. The wedding of Alexandra's nephew, Prince Constantine of Greece, and Bertie's niece, Sophia of Prussia, at the end of October, offered a convenient excuse for Eddie to leave England with his parents. He then journeyed to India, where he spent several months performing royal duties. Upon his return home, he was created Duke of Clarence and Avondale in an effort to improve his image. As his parents sought to find a wife for him, Eddie announced that he wished to marry Princess Hélène of Orléans, whose father was one of several claimants to the defunct French throne. While Queen Victoria gave her consent to the match, Hélène's father insisted with papal support that his daughter could not abandon her Catholic faith. After the proposed match was abandoned, Princess Victoria Mary of Teck emerged as a potential new marriage candidate for Eddie. While Alexandra was preoccupied with her son's marital prospects, her husband was increasingly absent. In 1891, the Prince of Wales was embroiled in the Tanby Croft affair that concerned allegations of cheating in a card game. While the prince himself was not the suspect, his passion for gambling was censured in the press. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales' affair with Daisy Brooke, later Countess of Warwick, threatened to become public knowledge when Daisy's former lover, Lord Beresford, accused the prince of interfering in their relationship. When Bertie went to Germany in August 1891, Alexandra left for Denmark for more than 2 months. The princess then went on to the Crimea with Tsar Alexander III and her sister Empress Maria to celebrate their silver wedding anniversary on the 9th of November, rather than attend her husband's 50th birthday festivities at Sandringham, highlighting how their marriage was often strained. While Alexandra was away, a fire tore through Sandringham and destroyed the upper floors, prompting urgent repair works ahead of the prince's birthday. A few days later, Prince George was taken ill with typhoid fever, and Alexandra hurried back home. While her younger son was slowly recovering, Alexandra turned her attention to her elder son, who was engaged to the Princess of Teck in early December. The celebrations were short-lived, as Prince Albert Victor fell ill with pneumonia and died at Sandringham on the 14th of January 1892, a few days after his 28th birthday. While Alexandra was navigating her grief over the loss of her favourite child, her surviving son, Prince George, was now heir to the throne. George, who was created Duke of York in 1892, had hoped to marry Marie, the daughter of his uncle Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, but had been denied. He was subsequently engaged to his late brother's fiancée, Princess Mary of Teck, and married her in July 1893. Although the couple showed few signs of romantic affection towards each other, in June 1894, Mary gave birth to a son named David, the future King Edward VIII. In late October 1894, Bertie and Alex received an urgent summons from Empress Maria in Crimea, where Tsar Alexander III was dying. By the time they arrived, the emperor was already dead, leaving his ill-fated son, Tsar Nicholas II, on the throne. Nicholas had recently been engaged to Princess Alex of Hesse, the daughter of Alexandra's late sister-in-law, Princess Alice. As she had done so 13 years earlier following the assassination of Alexander II, Alexandra was on hand to comfort her widowed sister, now Dowager Empress. A week after Alexander III's funeral, the prince and princess remained in St. Petersburg for the wedding of Tsar Nicholas and his bride, who became Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna. The following year, Princess Alexandra was delighted when her daughter Maud fell in love with her cousin Prince Charles of Denmark, and the couple were married in July 1896. The British public welcomed a further link to Danish royalty, and the festivities served as a prelude for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. On Alexandra's suggestion, the City Corporation of London made arrangements to provide free Jubilee dinners to 300,000 poor Londoners. When Victoria was moved to tears by the display of public support during the procession on the 22nd of June, Alexandra discreetly leaned over to wipe a tear from her face. By then, Victoria was old and frail, and after more than 3 decades in waiting, Alexandra was facing the imminent prospect of becoming queen. Meanwhile, in August 1898, Alexandra travelled to Denmark to attend her 80-year-old mother, Queen Louisa of Denmark, for the last 2 months of her life. She stayed behind to comfort her grief-stricken father, King Christian, and returned to Sandringham just in time for her husband's birthday. While Alexandra would be well equipped to carry out the public-facing duties of a queen, she struggled to satisfy the physical and emotional needs of her husband. After breaking off his affair with Lady Warwick, the Prince of Wales found new comfort in the arms of the young Alice Keppel. Alexandra's natural feelings of resentment were tempered by her recognition that Alice helped improve her husband's mood. Alexandra came into her own in October 1899 after the outbreak of the Second Boer War between the British and the earlier Dutch-German settlers in the South African colonies. As president of the Red Cross Society, she ordered a yacht to be converted into a hospital ship and renamed the Princess of Wales. Alexandra was also inspired by the example of Florence Nightingale during the Crimean War and sent nurses from the London hospital to South Africa, leading to the creation of the Queen Alexandra Nursing Service in 1902. During the early days of the war, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany visited England, where his behaviour alternated between kind words about his grandmother Queen Victoria and threats to challenge British imperial dominance. In a message to the German Foreign Secretary, Count Bernhard von Bülow, a Danish-German aristocrat whom she had known as a child, Alexandra described the German Kaiser as inwardly our enemy. After the Kaiser's departure, Alexandra returned to her war work, converting an old farmhouse on the Sandringham estate to house wounded officers. She was soon in mortal danger herself, while she and Bertie were on their way to Denmark in April 1900. As they boarded a train at Brussels, a young Italian anarchist opened fire, breaking the compartment window with one bullet and sending another that passed between the royal couple. Although Alexandra remained calm and composed, she would continue to have vivid memories of the incident and could recall every detail years later. On the 22nd of January 1901, Queen Victoria died at the age of 81 in the 64th year of her reign. Almost 4 decades after arriving in England, Alexandra was now Queen of the United Kingdom and Empress of India, while her husband became King Edward VII. After their accession, Edward made his queen a Lady of the Order of the Garter, the first time a woman had been inducted to the order since Margaret Beaufort, the mother of King Henry VII, was made a member all the way back in 1488. Alexandra made a striking impression alongside the king at the state opening of Parliament on the 14th of February, her first royal engagement as queen. Thus began the Edwardian era, a decade of glamour and jollity that preceded the tragedy that was to engulf Europe in 1914. The king and queen performed their duties effectively, although Edward was jealous of Alexandra's popularity by comparison with the public's often negative view of him. He consequently sometimes forbade her to join him on royal engagements in order to soak up the limelight himself. Shortly after Victoria's death, the Duke and Duchess of York left on a trip to Australia, leaving their 4 children with the King and Queen at Sandringham. George and Mary had reverted to Victoria and Albert's disciplinarian parenting approach, and the children were delighted to enjoy greater freedom in Edward and Alexandra's presence. After George and Mary returned from Australia at the end of the year, they were invested as Prince and Princess of Wales. Meanwhile, preparations were well underway for King Edward's coronation. 2 weeks before the scheduled date of the 28th of June 1902, Edward fell ill with appendicitis and reluctantly agreed to postpone the ceremony and undergo an operation. The surgery was successful, and on the 9th of August, Edward and Alexandra were crowned in a sumptuous ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The coronation of Edward and Alexandra in the late summer of 1902 was a notable event in the history of the era. Edward was the first new monarch in nearly 64 years, and this was an opportunity for Britain, the preeminent global superpower of the 19th century, to demonstrate its power to the world, although structurally that same imperial power was in decline. The United States had already overtaken the British economy by most metrics, and Britain was facing a growing cohort of rivals in a way which had not been the case when Victoria's coronation took place back in 1838. For the occasion, Alexandra's dress was designed by Lady Curzon, the wife of Lord Curzon, the British Viceroy of India. The new Queen admired Lady Curzon's fashion sense and had her aid her in designing a gown that had Indian elements that reflected Alexandra's dual position as both Queen of the United Kingdom and Empress of India. Roses, shamrocks and thistles designs were also incorporated into the delicate lace to symbolize the Crown's rule over England, Scotland and Ireland at a time when the Irish Home Rule and independence causes were escalating. Final alterations to the dress were made in Paris. On the coronation day, Alexandra wore this before an estimated 8,000 guests at Westminster Abbey, including prime ministers from various parts of the British dominions and dozens of Indian princes who represented the different parts of the British Raj. During the ceremony, Alexandra became the first Queen Consort to be crowned bearing the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond, meaning the Mountain of Light, a huge cut diamond that had come from India. The crown in question, named the Crown of Queen Alexandra, was only ever used for her coronation, though the practice of using the diamond for British royal crowns was continued, and the Koh-i-Noor diamond was reinserted into the crowns worn by Mary of Teck and the Queen Mother during their coronations in 1911 and 1937. Even after becoming king, Edward frequently travelled abroad without his wife, who would usually take the opportunity to visit relatives in Denmark or Greece. On a personal level, Alexandra's absence enabled the king to spend more time with his mistress, Alice Keppel, but Edward was also afraid that his outspoken wife would cause a diplomatic crisis. While Edward denied Alexandra access to official papers, he made them available to his daughter-in-law, Princess Mary, creating tension between the two women. Alexandra did accompany her husband to Ireland on 3 occasions, in 1903, 1904 and 1907, where her popularity helped the British government to resist demands for Irish Home Rule. In October 1903, Alexandra made a rare visit to Germany for the wedding of her nephew, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, to Princess Alice of Battenberg. The couple would go on to have 4 daughters and a son, Philip, who would in turn go on to marry Queen Elizabeth II. Alexandra's links to international royalty expanded in 1905 when her son-in-law, Prince Charles of Denmark, was proposed as the king of the newly independent Norway, which had been part of the Swedish crown since 1814. Alexandra was initially cautious about offering her support, but backed his claim after learning of German designs on the Norwegian throne. In November 1905, Prince Charles became King Haakon VII of Norway. A few months later, Alexandra received news that her father, King Christian IX, had died on the 29th of January 1906 at 87 years of age. Since Alexandra was particularly close to her eldest brother, now King Frederick VIII, she and Dagmar bought a private countryside retreat in Denmark called Vidå, which they frequently used as a summer residence when visiting their home country to see old friends and family. Thus, Alexandra never sundered her ties to her homeland. Alexandra's concerns about Kaiser Wilhelm echoed public anxiety about Germany's imperial ambitions in these years. The German Kaiser knew that Denmark presented a major obstacle to his hopes to challenge the British Navy in the North Sea, and came close to securing Danish neutrality from the late King Christian, only for Alexandra to urge her father to abandon the agreement. The Queen found a ready supporter in Admiral Sir John Fisher, who was appointed First Sea Lord in 1904. Like Alexandra, Fisher had warned against the British government's decision in 1890 to accept Germany's offer to exchange the Zanzibar Islands for the Heligoland archipelago off the coast of Schleswig-Holstein. Fisher believed that Germany would take action sooner or later and advocated for the strengthening of the Royal Navy in the North Sea. Fisher's solution was to invest in a new class of state-of-the-art battleships, beginning with the launch of HMS Dreadnought in 1906, which triggered an Anglo-German naval arms race. Fisher's suggestion that the Royal Navy should attack the German fleet in its home port earned him a reputation as a warmonger, as did his plans to launch an amphibious assault on Schleswig-Holstein to return it to Danish rule. While the Queen supported Fisher, the King preferred diplomacy and invited Wilhelm to Windsor on a new state visit in November 1907. While the two monarchs outwardly professed their friendship, the war drums continued to beat. By this stage, Edward's health was in severe decline, and he was regularly afflicted by attacks of bronchitis caused by his lifelong habit of heavy smoking and drinking. In summer 1908, following the Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907 that ended a long-standing dispute over Central Asia, Alexandra and Edward sailed to Reval, present-day Tallinn, to meet Nicholas II of Russia and his wife. The meeting significantly improved relations between the British and Russian courts and alarmed the Germans, who invited Edward to make a state visit to Berlin in February 1909. The king soon fell ill, and while Queen Alexandra effectively deputized for her husband, the mutual suspicions between London and Berlin remained as strong as ever. A visit in the summer by Nicholas and Alexandra to the Isle of Wight proved a happier occasion, even while a political crisis was brewing in Westminster. After several months of debate, the Liberal government's proposals for social reform in Chancellor David Lloyd George's People's Budget was rejected by the House of Lords in November. Prime Minister Herbert Asquith responded by calling an election, which the Liberals narrowly won in January 1910. Asquith threatened to create hundreds of Liberal peers to force the bill through the Lords, but the King refused. Edward's condition sharply deteriorated over the winter, and his efforts to restore his health in Biarritz were undermined by rare March snowfall. When the Queen urged him to join her on a cruise to Corfu, he refused and remained in France until late April. On the 3rd of May, Alexandra received a message that her husband was ill and hurried back to England. She arrived on the night of the 5th of May to find the king slumped in a chair. On the 6th, Edward collapsed after lunch, and the Queen personally administered oxygen to her husband in an attempt to save him, but 68-year-old Edward VII died just before midnight. After her son became King George V, Alexandra reluctantly moved out of Buckingham Palace and returned to Marlborough House. She was absent from George's coronation on the 22nd of June 1911 and was said to have lamented around this time that her deceased eldest son, Eddie, was not alive to become king. These statements aside, her absence from her son and daughter-in-law's coronation was a matter of tradition, as the Queen Dowager did not typically attend the coronation of the new King and Queen. In the years following her husband's death, Alexandra's brother, Frederick VIII of Denmark, died in May 1912, and in March 1913, her favourite brother, King George of Greece, was assassinated in Salonika. In June 1912, to mark the 50th anniversary of her arrival in England, Alexandra instituted Alexandra Rose Day, during which nurses handed out roses to raise funds for London hospitals. In summer 1914, the warnings Alexandra had been issuing about the Germans for half a century were finally realized. The assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo led Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia in late July. The Austrians received full German support, while Russia stood by its Orthodox brethren in the Balkans. German military strategists recognized that war with Russia would activate the Franco-Russian alliance of 1894 and planned to attack France in force before the Russian army could fully mobilize. While Britain did not have as strong an obligation to defend France or Russia, it was felt that the German threat to British global hegemony was very real. Thus, when the Germans marched through neutral Belgium into France on the 3rd of August, Britain declared war as a guarantor of Belgian neutrality. During the war, Alexandra reserved her bitterness for Kaiser Wilhelm and the German High Command, and she was saddened by the fact that some of her German relatives were caught up in public demonstrations of anti-German sentiment. As she had done in previous wars, Alexandra played an active role in supporting the welfare of British servicemen. She patronized the establishment of special hospitals to treat soldiers suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and, in contrast to her daughter-in-law Queen Mary, who found visits to hospitals difficult, Alexandra showed real sympathy for the wounded soldiers. She was outraged by the execution of Nurse Edith Cavell in October 1915 and saddened by the death of her friend Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, Secretary of State for War, who was killed in June 1916 on his way to Russia when the ship he was on ran into a mine. Alexandra had very direct experience of the war herself in 1915 and 1916. Aerial warfare was in its infancy when the First World War broke out in 1914. It developed intensely over the next 4 years, and by the end of it, large Gotha bomber planes and the like were being employed by the Germans. However, a lot of their bombing missions were carried out using Zeppelin airships. On 2 occasions, these attacked Sandringham while Alexandra was there, in mid-January 1915 and in early September 1916. After the first occasion, she reacted by saying, "This is too bad. Those beasts actually went straight to Sandringham. I suppose in the hopes of exterminating us with the Zeppelin bombs, though, thank God, they failed this time." Worse was to come. September 1916 saw the largest wave of Zeppelin raids of the entire war against Britain. One of these again launched attacks on Sandringham on the 17th of September, leading Alexandra and her daughter Victoria to seek shelter in the basement of the royal country house. By 1916, as large numbers of women were recruited for munitions production, Alexandra often visited the shell factories. Throughout the war, she supported her son George and strengthened his determination to defeat the Germans. In early 1917, Alexandra's nephew, Tsar Nicholas II, was removed from power in the February Revolution. The Romanovs were initially subject to house arrest by the Liberal Provisional Government, which considered the prospect of sending him to Britain. Although Prime Minister David Lloyd George agreed to offer asylum to the former Tsar, and Kaiser Wilhelm was willing to allow them to travel through Germany, King George V secretly blocked the initiative, fearing that the presence of the deposed Russian autocrat would risk socialist revolution in Britain. In August, the provisional government sent the Romanovs to the Siberian city of Tobolsk for their safety. However, after the Bolshevik Revolution in November 1917, they were taken to Ekaterinburg, where Nicholas, his wife, and their 5 children were executed in July 1918. The news of the fate of her Russian relatives dampened Alexandra's mood at a time when British, French, and American troops had successfully defeated the German spring offensive and were poised to secure victory in the war. Following the armistice, Alexandra congratulated her old friend, Field Marshal Douglas Haig, as he passed outside Marlborough House on his victory procession. Amidst the celebrations, Alexandra remained anxious about the fate of her sister Dagmar, who had taken refuge in the Crimea during the Russian revolutions of 1917. The Black Sea region was still under the control of anti-Bolshevik white armies. In April 1919, King George dispatched HMS Marlborough to convey his aunt to England. After staying briefly in England, the Russian Dowager Empress returned to her Danish homeland and spent her final years at Wiedor. In 1920, Alexandra's hopes for the return of Schleswig-Holstein were partly realized when the people of northern Schleswig voted for reunification with Denmark as part of the peace terms following the war. Alexandra had retained her youthful appearance well into her 70s, but a burst blood vessel in her eye in 1920 affected her vision for several weeks, while her deafness became increasingly acute. She continued to perform her duties, such as her annual Alexandra Rose Day rides, and remained a star attraction at a host of royal weddings, including that of her grandson Albert, Duke of York, the future George VI, and Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon in April 1923. After celebrating her 80th birthday at Sandringham in December 1924, she died after a heart attack on the 20th of November 1925, more than 60 years after her arrival in England. Alexandra's ascent during her lifetime was unexpected. First, because of the issues in the Danish succession. Her father was elevated within the line of succession and eventually became King of Denmark. This raised Alexandra's status, and she subsequently married the heir to the throne of the United Kingdom and the future Emperor of India. Her life was not easy at the same time. Her husband was a carousing philanderer who was serially unfaithful, and she lost several of her children. One difficult pregnancy left her with lifelong health complications. Alexandra spent much of her time as queen-in-waiting and then as queen travelling, often visiting her extended family back in Denmark, Greece and Russia. As a young princess, Alexandra was known as one of the most beautiful and fashionable women in Europe, and she quickly cultivated a reputation for kindness and generosity. In an age of political disorder at home and abroad, Alexandra endured a series of personal and family tragedies while sustaining the British royal family from the death of Prince Albert to the trauma of the First World War and beyond. The crown she wore on her coronation day is one of the most famous in the world, the first to be inset with the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond. She left behind a lasting legacy as a patron of charities and hospitals, and Alexandra Rose Day continues to be celebrated every year in her memory. What do you think of Queen Alexandra? Has she been underappreciated for her role as a stabilising presence during her 6 decades in Britain, or could she have done more to prevent her husband, King Edward VII, from leading a scandalous life? Please, let us know in the comment section. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.